Next is Independence for Change and Dr. Connolly.
I'm sharing with Deputy Bruin. Thank you, Lascan Corla. And I have to say, despite my efforts and the efforts of my colleagues and my colleagues on the left, I'm ashamed to be part of a system and a Dáil which thinks it's okay to have 10,397 people homeless, of whom 3,873 are children as of the 29th of last month, and we don't even have the up-to-date figures. I am deeply ashamed of that, even though I have done my best. I stand here and I listen to an 8.5-page speech, Minister, and I think you're a very logical, reasonable man. I have to say that to you, and I find you very helpful. However, you're here when the Senior Minister should be here, and you're here trying to defend something that can't be defended. And somebody, a government with a little sense, would say at this point, 10,397 people homeless, we're doing something seriously wrong here. Forget ideology and simply say, we're doing wrong. It's not okay to normalise homelessness or to institutionalise. We're trying to get over our history of institutionalisation, and once again the vast majority of people that are in those institutions are women and children, also men. In relation to Galway, as I speak, there are 306 families homeless. We don't have the figures for the children. As of this week, the CEO told Galway Bay FM that 90 families have been served with a notice to quit. The HAP that you refer to, and I welcome that you said it was a temporary measure, but that's a sleight of hand, and it's certainly not correct, because that change was brought in 2013 by Fine Gael and Labour, the most fundamental change of housing policy, where you brought in a housing assistance payment. And in the language locally used to us, we were told that is the only game in town. Now, that's the language used to us. No house was constructed in Galway City from 2009. And I know, Minister, you've acknowledged this. But the reason it wasn't constructed was because money was used on other items, and then money was used on HAP rather than build. And so what was a temporary measure is not accurate at all. It was a permanent policy change, and therein lies the crux of the problem. And we went on from that then to see HAP increase exponentially, and now it's over $500 million alone on HAP, not to mention RAS, not to mention long-term leasing. So your policy is to actively support a market that has utterly failed in every aspect of housing. And there is a place for landlords, and there is a place for the private market. But the government must be Ilor and Éireann. They must be in the middle of the fair. They must give a message out to the market that a home is not a commodity to be traded. It's a place to live, the most basic requirement before anybody can live a healthy life and participate in a democracy. That's the message that the government must give out. In Galway City, in recognition of the terrible housing crisis, where people are waiting 15 years for a house, and during that period of time have never been offered a house. Now, Minister, I'd like you to take this on board. How come somebody on a waiting list for a 15-year period, a 14-year period, never once was offered a social house? How could that be? What is wrong with that system? And in response to the crisis, the government finally set up a task force, and I welcome that. And you put on senior people on that. Mind you, you put on the people who also presided over the failure to highlight the housing crisis. But be that as it may, we've heard nothing from that task force. The announcement was made to great fanfare in February. Inappropriate fanfare, I might ask, in relation to a housing crisis, and we've heard nothing. No minutes published, no evidence of meetings being held, but most importantly, no plan. In a city that has no plan overall for this city, and where your own colleague, Minister Coveney, agreed with me that Galway, once again, has developer-led development. And so we have a lot of land. Kent Station, acres of land. The docks has acres of land. We have other public land. We have institutional land. And we have no overall master plan for the common good to build public housing for everybody. Everybody should have a right to public housing if that's what they want, under a controlled rent. And that sorts out the whole problem of stigma or utter nonsense about who should live beside who. You build public housing. There are any amount of precedents throughout the world. I'll finish because my time is up, Minister, but I really at my wit's end and my limit listening to 8.5 pages that has absolutely no ability to reflect on the seriousness of the problem and to change policy. Gar magat.